Arkin, William Arkin, who I had read a couple pieces by over the years, but I was not very familiar with this guy at all. But he is a journalist who specialized in like foreign policy and being a military expert. And he's worked for he was an NBC slash MSNBC journalist. He'd worked for NBC News off and on for I think close to 30 years. There's a real veteran of the game who's been around a lot, and he left NBC News, bailed on them, and he sent out this it was something out of Jerry Maguire, where he fucking quit and sent out this long like memo about why he left. And he sent it out to like a whole bunch of people at NBC News, and then it somehow made its hands it made its way into hands at other networks and other news agencies, and then it just leaked and has been put out there publicly. And it is glorious. Glorious. It's really quite amazing. Now, this is not I'll tell you, there was something about this, and sometimes you have these I've had the experience before where when you have somebody who's not in your camp, you know, there's like there are the kind of like anti-war libertarians who we read a lot and we look to, and I guess we're a part of that, you know, kind of world. But if, you know, like Ron Paul and Tom Woods or Scott Horton, obviously the guys at antiwar.com and all these people, they say all this stuff, and I'm like, yes, and I'm completely convinced by them. But you're out here for so long and you're kind of like, why is this whole system crazy? Everybody here is crazy. And sometimes it's really nice when someone within that system is like, oh yeah, by the way, you're right. You're right. This is insanity. And it's just, it really warmed my heart that someone would come out, someone from the inside of the mainstream media would come out and be like, this is goddamn insanity.
It's exactly what we've been saying about these people. And it's nice to get some confirmation that we were right. We're not just making it up. It's not that you just go straight from the government to working at CNN. And so what is CNN? It's basically, what is it, a media branch of the government that it's just run by people and analysts from the CIA?
Right. And exactly. And you and MSNBC too, which is where, you know, this guy was working partially. And those guys, you know, who hire Brennan out of the CIA, or if you go to MSNBC now, it's like one of their show hosts is
like, I'm going to believe that the ex-director of the CIA now works at CNN and doesn't really just work at the CIA. There's no part of me that believes that that's like, now he works at CNN, has nothing to do with the CIA, and just represents CNN with his genius of this time. No, that guy's just works for the CIA, and now this is his new post, is hanging out at CNN. That's right.
And at the least, even if he wasn't directly working for the CIA,
he still represents their point of view.
Well, if you know, it's kind of like, I used to, you know, notice this a lot when it was during Obama's years, right? Where Obama would be committing these kind of heinous war crimes. And you know, whether it's indiscriminate killings of innocent people through drone bombs or the stuff we've gotten into where he knowingly, you know, armed and funded Al-Qaeda members in Syria, you know, like straight up war crimes, treason, crimes against humanity, the type of stuff that should get you hung in the public square, or at least thrown in jail for the rest of your life. And there'd be like someone on from the Bush administration who's like there, you know, whether it was someone in the CIA during Bush or one of the military guys or something like that. And they would be, at least their posture is, I'm very opposed to Obama, right? Like Obama's messing up in foreign policy, but they'd never touch that stuff. They'd never be like, oh, well, he's committed war crimes or he's done this. And sometimes you can go to the more conspiratorial part of your brain and be like, maybe they're all working together. Maybe this guy's still working for the CIA, you know, like kind of like you were just saying with Brennan, maybe still working for the CIA. But even if you don't go there, it kind of doesn't matter because they're already boxed in. So if somebody who worked for the Bush administration goes, Obama's committing war crimes, this guy should be thrown in jail. Well, then the next response is like, but you guys committed war crimes too. You guys tortured people. You guys, you know what I mean? Like illegally invaded countries, did all this fucked up shit. So you almost, if you bring that up, then you also bring up, you also incriminate yourself. So even someone like Brennan, who was involved in treason when he was at the CIA, how could he call out the CIA now? Because if he does, then he is incriminating himself also. So right away, look, I'm not even against wanting to get an interview with the guy who used to work for the CIA, or wanting to get, information from him that maybe he would have an insight into something that you wouldn't. But if you were honest journalists, you would let your viewers know, hey, this is the perspective of a guy who was in the CIA, a slightly controversial group throughout the last, 70 years or however long they've existed. I think they were started in the mid 40s. So, you would at least kind of be like, okay, take this in context. Like, this is who we're talking to. But they just put him out like expert who knows, expert who should be trusted in everything. So anyway, with this guy, Arkin, who ended up leaving NBC News, it's not one of the things that's almost that makes it even more powerful to me personally, is that it's not that this guy is coming at things from the exact same ideological perspective that me and you would have. It's not like this guy is saying like, hey, I'm a free market libertarian and I see this and I think of, the act of aggression as immoral and blah, blah. It's not about that. It's just the fact that somebody who almost certainly has wildly different ideological predispositions from what me and you would have can still look at something and go, this is just the reality of the situation. Forget what what your views on every single policy are. Forget where you fall on the ideological spectrum. The point is that if anybody is honestly looking at this from a common sense perspective, this is what's going on. This is the reality of the situation. So he wrote this memo, which was, I think, supposed to be an internal memo to NBC, but it leaked. We got it. Let's go through it a little bit. What do you say, Fire?
I love it.
I know you do. I know you do. I only ask you questions that I already know the answer to, and they always come up good. All right. Here we go. Here is Arkin's memo. January 4th is my last day at NBC News, and I'd like to say goodbye to my friends, hopefully not for good. This isn't the first time I've left NBC, but this time the parting is more bittersweet. The world and the state of journalism in tandem crisis. My expertise, though seeming to be all the more central to the challenges and dangers we face, also seems to be less valued at the moment. And I find myself completely out of sync with the network, being neither a day-to-day reporter nor interested in the Trump circus. So right away, that's the first paragraph of it, and this is the stuff that we talk about all the time, right? Is that all that NBC News and all of the other, TV news outlets for that matter, all they do is focus on the day-to-day reporting and the Trump circus, which basically are the same thing, because the day-to-day is all driven by what Trump has done recently. I mean, it's really a cartoon. Like, I'm just watching the news today, and all they have time for is what Trump said today about the wall, what's going on with the government shutdown, what Nancy Pelosi said about the Trump meeting versus what Trump said. And Trump said this, but that's not the same thing that Trump said last weekend. Trump said Mexico would pay for the wall, and now he's saying we should pay for the wall, and then we'll get it back from a trade deal with Mexico. Is that really a broken promise, or is that this? No, and it's ever like, is there ever time to say, hey, we've been in Afghanistan for 17 years. What's going on there?
The media is basically a constant, hey, don't you guys realize this guy's an asshole? It's like a chick who just got dumped by her husband and he was cheating, and she can't do anything but just go, but that guy's an asshole.
Right.
It's that, but it's also just propaganda. Like,
yeah.
Watch CNN. It's propaganda. But I think they finally kind of, when I turn it on, they're not talking about Russia collusion as much anymore, right?
Well, they'll pick it back up and then drop it off a little bit. But if there's any little break, they'll always, I don't know. It's always like something, the way they're reporting it now seems to always be something like, a source tells us that Donald Trump is terrified. But then you see Donald Trump and he's just the same guy he's always been. And there's not one, you don't smell any fear on him at all. Trump said once, it was one of my, God, I say this a lot, but it was one of my favorite things Trump said, but recently, it's just so funny. And I know it's ridiculous, but it's just so funny. But they said something about impeachment got brought up, and he goes, how can you impeach somebody who's doing such a great job? Which I just thought was great. I think that's about as much as Donald Trump thinks through impeachment. Impeachment? I'm awesome. What are you talking about? And they're like, a source says Donald Trump is terrified, and Donald Trump just eating a steak with ketchup. Like, what are you talking about? Like, he has no idea.
I read all my news online, but for a nice stretch of life, I used to like to turn on CNN for a little bit just to see, hey, what are these guys talking about?
Sure.
And I would say over the course of enough days or even months, every time I turned it on, it was Russia collusion. And I just decided, all right, this is just propaganda. That's all this is.
It almost got boring.
It didn't just get boring. It's that they just think, hey, if we say this enough times, we're going to make it true.
Yeah.
So we're not going to report on what's going on in the country. We're just going to report on this. And I got to tell you, as a person who really enjoys the news, I remember 2 years ago reading more interesting articles about what was going on because you have to fill a newspaper. You got to fill time. So if you're not just screaming about Russia collusion, and this is what he's going to get into, you might hear about the military-industrial complex. Right. You might hear about the corruption of unions and why roads aren't being repaired. You start hearing about some of these more structural problems that exist.
Which are just, number one, I agree with you that I find them more interesting.
Yeah.
But of course, on top of that, these are stories that actually matter.
Yeah.
Like, say whatever you will about it. The day-to-day stuff only matters so much. It's almost like you live in a house where there's like major structural problems and the foundation is crumbling, and all you talk about all day is like the leak. It's just we patched up the leak this way, but now it's diverted the water into this way.
Right.
And blah, blah. It's like, are we ever going to talk about the foundation? I mean, it's really and I know that I'm biased, obviously, toward the issues that I care about, but whether you see them from our angle or not, they're issues. You can't deny these are major issues. I mean, we just talked about on the show the other day where we're going, oh, look at these projections to what the payments on the interest on the debt are going to start to cost. I mean, no matter what side of the ideological spectrum you come from, that's a big story. Never gets discussed.
Well, I'll say this.
Next to never.
This is going to be a little bit cocky, but I think you're going to agree with me. It's because I think, at least in what we like to explore, we're kind of obsessed with finding truth. Yeah. And maybe we're not always right about what truth is, but I can read when someone's understand if someone's talking about the structural foundation of a house or if they're, over obsessing about a leak that doesn't make a difference. And it's just not interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I do agree with you. And yes, it does sound a little bit cocky, but we're right all the time and everyone else is wrong. So it's hard to not sound cocky when you're right about everything.